Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Labocine live series. My name is Alexi Gambis. I'm the artistic director of Imagine Science Films. For those that are new to Imagine Science Films, we're a film festival, but also an incubator. And our goal is to try to encourage more collaborations between scientists and filmmakers, but also showcase work that really pushes the boundaries of how scientific topics and issues are interweaved in cinematic experiences. We strongly believe that a lot of science films have oftentimes been stereotyped in terms of being a specific type of film, and we're really interested in work that really kind of challenges those notions and work that's hybrid work, docufiction work, observational film, fictional film, and stand by because in a few weeks from now we'll be having our 13th edition of the festival that will be online from October 16th to the 23rd with over 25 features and about 50 short films from all around the world. But we're really excited today to have a friend and a director, Peter Mettler. I'm going to say a few words about Peter and then speak a little bit about his film, The End of Time. But Peter, based both in Switzerland and Canada, is a strong supporter of independent creativity, having collaborated with numerous filmmakers and artists and musicians around the world. His work is really interesting because it melds intuitive processes with drama, essay, experiment, and documentations. His films hold a unique and influential position in creative expression, not only in film, but also in new art forms where cinema and other disciplines merge together. Meditations on our world, rooted in personal experiences, his work reflects the visions and wonder of their characters and audiences alike. Mettler's films have garnered many prizes and many retrospectives internationally, and it's a really big honor to have Peter today. Peter has been part of Imagine Science for a few years now. We had the honor of showing Picture of Light at the Anthology Film Archive a few years ago, and then we showed The End of Time as our opening film at the festival at the Museum of the Moving Image. I believe it was in 2012 or 2013. And we showed a few years ago also Becoming Animal as well with Peter. But before we introduce Peter to have a conversation about The End of Time, I wanted to begin our conversation or spark the conversation by showing the trailer of The End of Time. Peter, so great to see you. Thank you so much for being here today as part of this Imagine Science live series that I should mention is also done in partnership with our platform, Labocine. Before we begin, I just wanted to kind of see how you were doing in these turbulent, rather strange but unique times that we're living in. How are things on your end, Peter?
Well, hello, by the way,
Yeah.
and nice to be here talking with you. We're fine. I'm in Toronto. Um, I was editing before lockdown started, so I had a head start on isolation for a few months, and it's been continuing. We had a beautiful summer. Been watching nature grow around me, and that's been inspiring. I think we're very lucky here in Canada.
Well, Peter, it's interesting. I mean, there's so much that we can speak about, and I wanted to sort of kick off the conversation by asking you, since this is something that you're also very kind of present in the film, and in different moments in this film, The End of Time, which is a mesmerizing kind of portrait of the concept of time and whether it's reality or illusion or scientific, and really trying to define that concept of time. To ask you, how do you think about time these days, or is it something that you've been thinking a little bit about now, and also in relation to the film that you made, which is now, how long has it been since you made The End of Time?
Uh,
Was
Came out in 2012, so it's been a while, and I had to brush up actually, to be honest, before talking to you, because I've been obviously doing other things, and I tried to stop thinking about time. You know, there's only so far down that labyrinth you want to go over and over
yeah,
again.
yeah,
However, it has been really interesting. I think for everybody, I've heard it from lots of people that their perception of time these last months has been really bizarre. You know, on the one hand, it feels like it's dragging out, like you're always in the same place, and it's expansive. But on the other hand, events seem like they just happened yesterday when they were 5 months ago, which all kind of points in the direction, which is one of the things that the film explores, how, you know, time can be considered possibly as a human perception, that it doesn't exist as its own thing, that it's really a way that we observe change, a way that we observe experience, and we try, like so many other things, to quantify it and track it and predict it, conceptualize it. This is a human tendency that we put on so many aspects of our
yeah,
lives.
yeah. Peter, you bring up an interesting point, which is this necessity, right, to almost dissect time, right, to understand time, to harness time. And I was wondering if, in the making of a film about time, which is such a big undertaking, whether or not you were also calculated in the approach that you had in making it, or did you let yourself kind of be more, meditative and less calculated about how you capture time, and maybe that was something that was more in the editing process, that you figured out, these are the different analogies, or this is kind of the language, or the aesthetics that I will have. But did you have a did you have a specific almost approach in how you wanted to tackle time, or almost like a hypothesis, like an overarching, okay, this is how I'm gonna tackle it, or was it more, I'm just gonna collect these different fragments and then try to put them together?
Um, Most of the films I've made, I would call exploratory. And by that, I mean that they're not scripted and structured at the outset. They're really driven by thematics, or by some kind of vision even. Um, but key is that it's an unfolding process of discovery and association. So in the case of The End of Time, there's actually, you can find it online, a 10-minute proposition of what the film would be before I made it. And you can see that it's, fairly, absolutely connected, but it's also fairly different. And it's suggesting strategies, and it's asking questions. And one of the first things in that film's process that I was interested in was actually meteorology, was cloud formations, was the pathways of water and how water leaves the planet or leaves the surface of the earth and goes up into the atmosphere, whether it's from our breath or whether it's from big industry, whether it's from a rainforest. And in researching that, which is essentially change, I started to get wrapped up in this idea of time as change. And then it was kind of clinched when it was pointed out to me that in many languages, the word for time and the word for weather is the same, like in French, le temps. So that's an example of how the process goes. You know, you start musing and investigating a particular area, and that leads to more and more tangents and shades and associations of the theme. So the film ultimately is not trying to explain time. It's not a physics film. It's you know, not your traditional educational kind of presentation. It's really an experience through a time machine, which is film itself. Cinema is a time machine, and that alone you can contemplate for quite a while, because you're shooting things in the moment, which immediately become recorded as the past, which are to be shown in the future. And that's something that's really informing our consciousness these days. You know, the technologies, the mediums we use, and how it distorts our, or maybe not distorts, but affects our perception of time. So then I chose a few places to investigate. One being Hawaii for its geological time, where it's obviously there's earth being produced, there's lava, there's volcanoes growing. The scientific approach, where at CERN they're investigating the Big Bang, looking for the Higgs boson, a missing particle that at the time is what they were researching for. And these incredible machines they've built to try and see into that, try and see into time, try and see into conditions of the Big Bang, as well as the telescopes on top of Mauna Kea, which are literally looking back through time towards the beginning of the Big Bang. And human time, there's all shades of human time. There's Detroit with its eras of the automotive industry that have crumbled, being taken over by, you know, it's kind of a birthplace of techno music, and that's also, to me, representative of the digital age. So those are some examples of how I would organize my strategy.
And Peter, what I noticed about these portraits, that a lot of the, you know, a lot of these different kind of worlds that you depict, you know, not only is it you as the filmmaker trying to depict time as change, but they're also in their own respective fields trying to visualize time, right? To understand it in their own ways, which I thought was beautiful. It was almost like this Russian doll effect, right? That you're trying to understand how you're trying to visualize how they visualize time. It's almost like a two-step process, which I thought was really fascinating as well, especially with regards to, you know, the meteorologist, or, you know, the volcanoes, or the Large Hadron Collider, is that you're in a way trying to get into their minds about how they visualize that. But I had a question about these portraits, because one of the things that I noticed when I was rewatching it again, because I remember we showed it in the beautiful theater at the Museum of the Moving Image, is that you have, you know, especially it happens a lot at the end, but you have these kind of insertions of other portraits into some of the, you know, like almost like little evocations that are happening throughout the film, where you know, you reference the ants, or at the very end, there's almost like a blending of these worlds that comes together. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, about this idea of time blending, but also your world blending, and creating these beautiful kind of montage-like sequences that we see, or these references to the worlds. I remember, and we'll show a few clips, but I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about that.
Well, the two things. One, first one's a bit of an aside, but I remember that screening at the Museum of the Moving Image, especially because such a beautiful cinema, and the architecture of the cinema was such that there's a sequence in the film which is a kind of geometric circle that's a depiction of harmonics.
Yeah.
In music and sound, and these harmonics are creating line movement in the geometry. And I remember how that radiated into the physical building.
Right.
The building looked like that geometry, and it was really an incredible screening for that.
Yeah, yeah.
But in terms of this, let's say, blending of images within the film, there's especially a pronounced sequence towards the end where you're really seeing aspects of the film that you've seen prior, layered and moving in different rhythms and states. To me, I mean, it's kind of like, I've called it different things. I've called it like a possible film of the future.
Like almost like a record, right? Like that it would almost has like a fossilized, it could be used as evidence, almost like a...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like archaeology almost.
Yeah.
The layering of it. But I also see that as what happening in our memory, in our brains. There's this layering of fragments of images and associations. And I also see it actually happening as we surf the web, because, you know, we're moving around so fast from place to place, and these things in our head are connecting and layering. And it's almost like seeing several things at once, and not using the traditions of film language, which of course began with a single shot, and then there started to be movement, and then there started to be close up, and then there started to be intercutting. You know, the whole language of cinema is evolving. And that's why I say of the future, because perhaps our capacity for reading images, just as we channel surf in the past, will become more commonplace, that we're seeing many things at once and seeing them in layers. Excuse me.
Peter, I wanted to show a small clip, which is towards the beginning of the film, because I wanted to speak a little bit about you as the narrator, right? Or that you come in a few times in the film, and it was interesting to me because it almost had like this biblical aspect to it, you know, that you in a way like priming time, and in some cases you also would ask, you know, at the end, that's your mother, right? At the very last.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's interesting how there's like, you know, not only in the blending of the images that you have this kind of, you know, reminders of time, and reminders that time is elastic and blends with other times, and but also you as kind of this voice that comes in. And I just wanted to show this first clip, where which happens right before we get into the Large Hadron Collider, and talk a little bit about it, if we can just roll that first clip.
In the beginning, there were no names. Things don't have names. We made them up. Many cultures have a creation story. They often start in a similar way. In the beginning, there was no time. Or put another way, time is all there was. You don't always need to know the name of what you see. It doesn't matter what time it is.
I guess I can look at the sunrise or sunset the same way you are looking at that. And I enjoy it every minute of it when I have the time. The beginning of time, that's a much harder question. And this is part of the things that we try to understand, to get hints of what happened if we believe this model of the Big Bang, of the beginning of the universe. Okay, so let's go for the real thing, no?
Well, first of all, I love this beginning, and I also love the fact that there's this very kind of majestic way to introduce it, and then it goes into more of kind of like the mundane, like almost like cinema verite style. So you kind of break. Tell us a little bit about the scripting or the idea of having you begin with this kind of meditation on time and words, and how you thought about that. Was that something that you had thought about early on, or something that came later in the editing process?
Again, it's being put together as I'm exploring, as the film's being made. So I was actually researching CERN, and they told me, "Oh, you have to come here right now, because we're about to go into the situation where you can't go in there anymore because they're shooting particles around, and it's a lethal environment, and it might be like that for a couple of years." So I went. That was actually during research still, and so I really didn't have a plan yet. And I was amazed, as you can see. I told you about the clouds, and those beautiful clouds coming over the hills in the Jura, which is right beside CERN. And then they gave us an incredible tour for 3 days, and were explaining what they were doing. It was a really amazing visit. So when we built that in editing, I mean, I'm trying with my filmmaking to kind of work in this threshold between visceral experience, poetic reality, if you will, and, like you say, documentary, cinema verite, recording things as they unfold. So that film and many of my films are constantly going back and forth between those two worlds, as if one is perception itself, it's image and sound and feeling, which hopefully transmits to the viewer in that way, combined with facts and people and ideas that are spoken. And I add my own voiceover, hesitantly, I might add, because I really don't want to be a voice of God. But I think it offers anchor points. It usually is in the form of a suggestion or a question more than a statement, because the films don't present hypotheses or strong polarized points of view. They're really more musings around a particular situation. And that intro for me, it's essentially about, you know, what is the world before we perceive it and conceptualize it, you know? So this idea of in the beginning, there was only what was there, then the human looks at it and the human starts to quantify it and try to make sense of it. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's a human condition. And our perception of the world is so specifically human. And this is how we are talking to each other. This is how we have language. This is how we have science. You know, so to sort of set that up, also as an introduction to CERN, like this incredible human endeavor to create some of the most amazing technology on Earth, to look into the atomic and to look through time. It's an incredible feat, you know, but it's through our human perception towards that reality that would exist without us. You know?
It's beautiful because it seems almost that these moments of meditation, you know, are interrupted by the necessity to kind of go back into the reality, right? Go back into what's happening. And in a way, you know, you never specifically ask, you know, the scientists. It's almost like they just kind of come into the discourse. You're speaking and suddenly, you know, the scientist says, well, it's, you know, come with me. This is the way. And it feels it's just a very seamless and beautiful transition where you don't necessarily ask them specifically, but they just kind of enter into your consciousness and just take it from there. And I thought that was a really, really beautiful transition into the kind of this portrait. But Peter, I had another question about that, which is something that I noticed, and maybe I'm mistaken, but did you ever feel that you needed to remind the different people that you were, you know, experiencing these stories with, to remind them about the fact that you were making a film about time, or to discuss time? Meaning that, did you ever feel that you needed to interrupt or come in and say, well, and what are your thoughts about time? Or can you tell me a little bit? I know at the very end with your mom, it's an amazing moment where we'll talk about that in a little bit. But did you ever feel that you, as kind of the watchmaker or the kind of the time guide, felt that you needed to remind us or the people that you were interviewing that you were making a film about time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, in my conversations with filming the people I'm filming, I try not to say too much. I mean, I try, similar to the film itself, to introduce the odd question or statement that would provoke something more from the other person. It's not so much about me positing my views as it is listening. But you know, I might not have called it time in the subject. It might be about some other aspect of change or life, or being in the present. You know, there's all kinds of different shades of how you can talk about time. But certainly for me, I was navigating a course, let's say, that seemed relevant to the topic.
Peter, I want to show another clip. So I wanted to veer into now parts that are perhaps not as, you know, a little bit more nonverbal. And I noticed that there's a few moments in the film where there's music. And there's this amazing little clip that I want to show that's like about a minute long. Let's just play the clip and then just talk a little bit about it.
I feel like I experience time in cycles so much that it's hard for me to believe that my death will be the end. For me, even. I like the idea that I'm not just heading toward, an end, but that my end will be a beginning also. And that seems just more natural, but I don't know if it is that way.
Yeah, I love this piece from the ants to the dilapidated houses in Detroit. Peter, can you talk a little bit about your kind of the I know that it's always hard to kind of discuss these things, but the thought process behind these montages and maybe the incorporation of music in different moments in the film, almost as like a tempo, as like kind of like an oscillation or adding rhythm to some of these pieces. Yeah,
First of all, I'm not sure. I wasn't getting the sound on that clip. Were you hearing it?
I was hearing it. Yeah,
Okay, good. Maybe
I was hearing it. I think it's streaming okay to the world. But I'm also
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
In that case, in that edit, it's serving a number of functions in the storyline, if you will, or the composition of the film. It's part of exploration. I think it might even be introduction to Detroit, which is obviously in a state of transition as the industry has subsided and racial riots changed the conditions of the city. So there's these abandoned neighborhoods which are in a state of obvious transformation. At the same time, we're heading towards what I mentioned before, this kind of digital revolution, transformation that's happened in the last decades, of which Detroit, for me, is emblematic because of the techno scene.
Yeah.
And we're hearing the music of Richie Houghton,
Yeah.
who's a key figure in all that. And that particular piece of music has a very clockwork sense to it. It's very much like tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, and then at the same time, we're hearing one of the people who we'll see living in the gardens of a recreated community in Detroit, where they've taken over an abandoned neighborhood and developed a block, living communally and growing their own food. And she's talking about her idea of death not being the end. So there's several ideas working together at the same time that create that passage in the film. And again, it's kind of like a composition, like you're working as much on a story as you are a piece of music, that has an unfolding in time where you're trying to carry the viewer through a set of experiences and ideas.
Something that I really loved also, Peter, was this idea of using the voices almost as like the personification of the houses, right? That they were speaking about death and they were speaking about their own condition, but that we were seeing these houses and each one of them almost represented like these different portraits of their own insecurities or fragilities or vulnerabilities. And it brings me to this other point, which is, as you're capturing time in this film, this idea of dissociating things, right? Or kind of creating these combinations where you have human voices either, overlaid over natural landscapes, or human voices overlaid over technology or over infrastructure, that this idea of dissociation also in a way helps us understand that, that when we're talking about time, things are almost like dissociated or dismembered in a way. And I thought that one aspect is visualizing time, and then the other aspect is almost like this this dissociation that happens, which I thought was beautiful.
Dissociation, but also association.
And association. That was the other thing, yeah.
Yeah, and again, I think that's how our minds work, and cinema is incredible that it can replicate in certain ways experience, and how our memory works, how the poetry of our layering and associative thinking is working all the time.
Yeah, exactly. That was the other thing I was going to mention, is this idea of scale also, right? That you play a lot with scale in this film and most of your films, actually, that you go from these kind of, macroscopic shots of ants, to more kind of aerial shots of different landscapes. But was that something that you thought a little bit about as well, as this idea of playing around with scale, or associating different scales, kind of juxtaposing them in different moments in the film?
I mean, I think in a general sense, it just speaks to this idea of seeing more deeply into things, that the physicists can look at things on an atomic level, and we can look at things from the perspective of outer space. And there's always something there, and it's a question of what's the resolution, what are the number of things that we are able to perceive in that. It's really just a general poke at. There are many, and that's an amazing thing about science. I mean, what we see with our eyes is already incredible, and there's a lot there. But with these other instruments, including the cameras of cinema, we're able to see even more. And it's really just using that.
Yeah. That brings me to a point, Peter, since we're in the realm of speaking about science film. One of the things that I wanted to ask you also about was that sometimes as filmmakers, we're not able to actually have all of the images, especially when we're dealing with science. Sometimes we just can't get those images, right? Because they're either things that were done as part of the research. They can be simulations. They can be things that have been shot with telescopes or microscopes. And I was wondering, this may be more of a broad question to you as a filmmaker, but how comfortable are you taking images that were filmed or recorded, by scientists or by other people, and incorporating them into your film? Because you have these beautiful animations of the Large Hadron Collider, and I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about, the importance of you documenting, or you actually taking those images, versus images that may have been lent to you for the purposes of the film, and you creating a new languages with images that are maybe were done for scientific reasons. I don't know if my question makes sense, but images that were not necessarily things that you had access to, that you incorporated into the film.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. There's different ways to answer that. I mean, I think as I grow into filmmaking over the years, I see myself less and less as an auteur, and more as a medium, or a funnel for all the experience that the rest of humanity has been collecting together. And I think that applies to each of us. We may feel like we're the individual who knows this and that, but most of what we know this and that about is because of the collective experience moving forward. So, using images that have been very specifically representative of a particular exploration or a particular documentation, I think are relative to that collective unconscious. That's one way of describing it, that collective awareness. So I have no trouble with it. I mean, I think also as filmmakers, we're extremely lucky, because, for example, I can walk into CERN as a layman and have a conversation and be tolerated by scientists who've been doing this all their lives, and we can share our experience. And I have the license because I'm an artist, because I'm a poet, because I can interpret, because I can take something from Detroit and put it beside something from CERN, and I'm allowed to do that. And you know, when people are working in their own strict disciplines, like scientists, they don't really have the freedom to do that, except maybe in private in their spare time. So it's kind of a naive privilege that sometimes results in new perspectives, you know, from the filmmaking point of view.
Let's see another clip where we start seeing a little bit how these worlds kind of come together. I just wanted to show like a very small clip of that, which happens towards the end of the film. If we can just play that that little clip. So Peter, what I find fascinating about this little montage is that there's never one way in which you combine the images together. There's almost like, whether it's different ways in which you transition or playing with, you know, the negative of an image or superimposing. It's like you're continuously reinventing how you reassemble. It's almost like a puzzle, and you're reassembling it at the ends. And you're doing it in different permutations and different ways. And you know, I don't know if you would feel comfortable speaking a little bit about whether this was more of kind of like a stream of consciousness type of editing, or whether there was something that you were driven by, or having like a specific type of rhythm in how you did these transitions at the end. But yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about this time blending montage sequence.
Right. So just to reiterate, this is the sequence we were talking about before, that kind of layers things and could be a cinema of the future. And maybe I'll preface it also by saying it's an interesting sequence because it does stand out in the film as being quite radical to the rest of the film. And it's quite a contentious scene. You know, I've been told by people, oh yeah, the film's great, but why did you put that, you know, experimental thing in the end? feeling that, you know, it ruined the film, and other people thinking that it's the, you know, culmination and the epiphany of the whole film. So it's an interesting sequence how it addresses or how people react to it. So for me, I've since I made the film Gambling Gods and LSD, I've been involved in actually developing a technology with the people who make Touch Designer, which is a software that's used extensively now for many different purposes. And Greg Hermanovich, who runs that company, and I for years have been building an interface that allows you to have multi-channel images and sounds, to be able to mix them in real time. I do that in various kinds of performances with, you know, most recently and maybe most notably with Franz Treitler of the Young Gods and the anthropologist Jeremy Narby. We do a live show where one talks, one does music, and I do these image mixes. And it's a very exploratory, improvisational kind of creation where you're creating a film on the spot. Just to give background of how, you know, how that comes to be. So for this film, I took elements of the film and created mixes, but it wasn't like I just did one mix and it was done. It was really, I created mixes, I created sound scores, and I would go, you know, from a mix to an edit, back to a mix, back to an edit, and slowly crafted this thing that is what it is. That's how it came to be.
Did
I'm
you?
not sure if that answered your question, actually.
No, you did answer, Peter. Did you use, and maybe I'm asking too much, did you use only the footage that you had been using as the final footage, or did you use as your raw matter all the footage that you had taken when you created these sequences, or did you only limit yourself to what had actually appeared prior to that sequence? I'm just curious, yeah. Or maybe you don't know. Yeah, just yeah.
I pretty much all what things that have been in the film, but there might be a couple of things that were not. Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of exactly like what scientists do, right? Where you have to run different simulations, right? And you do different simulations or different trials of images, and you kind of perfect, or and there's almost like a specific, yeah, there's something very science about kind of doing several runs of that simulation. Peter, I wanted to end with this really moving little sequence at the end with your mom, and again you know, your voice appearing and you asking your mom about time, and a little bit of a moment where she first tries to figure out exactly what you're asking her. and then her giving you know, her answer to that. If we can play this little last clip.
In the house where I grew up, there was a book by the Russian author Dostoevsky. It read, "In the apocalypse, the angel swears that there will be no more time." It's said very clearly and exactly. When the whole of man has achieved happiness, there won't be any time, because it won't be needed. Time isn't a thing. It's an idea. It'll die out in the mind.
So all they can do is hope that all goes well.
What is time?
Excuse me?
What is time?
what the time is now?
No.
Don't forget I'm a foreigner. I'm not that perfect in English. What did you mean?
What is time?
What is time? The time is to enjoy everything you possible can do. Is that the right answer?
I don't think there is a right answer.
I think we just have to make whatever time we have in our life, we have to make the most of it. I look at it that way.
So does time go faster and faster?
Yes, as you get older, the time definitely goes faster and faster. And we don't have that much time to do all the things one wants to do.
What day is it today?
Today is May the 9th, 2010, and by God, it's Mother's Day.
A really moving piece, Peter, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about kind of ending or closing with your mom, and after this really epic journey around different worlds, bringing it back home, bringing it back to you, bringing it back to where you come from, your home. And if you could, if you could speak a little bit about this kind of epilogue to the piece.
So that's an example of something I was not shooting with the intention of using in the finished film. It really was a visit to my parents on Mother's Day. I had my camera with me. I was kind of showing them the camera, and then just spontaneously that conversation started. And you asked before, do I ever actually talk about time with my subjects? Well, there's an example that was very specific.
Yeah.
And I shot that. I don't even think I looked at it for a long time in editing because I didn't think I would use it. And then I came across it, and after having gone on this, few-year journey of exploration and all kinds of directions around the idea of time, I see my mother saying something so simple from a human perspective, and actually speaking, from one generation to the next about how important it is to use your time to do what you want to do. That message seemed in its simplicity to be maybe the most important message of the film.
As sort of a conclusion, Peter, I wanted to ask you, including your mom, whether you had shared the finished piece with your subjects, and whether or not, whether that was something that was important for you in terms of, because you were saying that you were the artist, or, the poet, and that you had this liberty of combining things, of dissociating and combining, whether it was important for you to then re kind of deliver this to the people that were present in the film, and tell them, well, this is how I kind of put it together. And I was wondering if that is something that you did, or that you were interested in getting their perspective on that kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a tricky thing once you finish a film, years later, that you've shot in different parts of the world with people you may have only spent an afternoon with.
Yeah.
And also you know, I try to be upfront about it when I'm filming certain people, that they may not end up in the film, and that's always, you know, it's not because they're not great and because I don't like them. It's just because it didn't fit the integrity of the piece. But yeah, I mean, I would say a large number of them have seen the film, and we try to notify everybody, but it's unfortunately not that easy to gather everybody in one place and have a, which would be nice, a celebratory kind of screening, which you find to be more common if you're doing something in one local place, or if it's a fiction and the crew comes out and that sort of thing. So I hope that people see it, and I hope that they can see that they're a piece of a fabric of ideas and humanity. It's less a portrait of them, you know, that they aren't too disappointed if it's not like a show about them in the end.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And what about you, Peter? What about like your relationship to the film? Has it aged well in terms of how you, I mean, we were just talking before going online about, you know, revisiting a film and rewatching it, and also the fact that a film is also bound to specific ways in which we visualize and use technology at that, you know, even 10 years ago, it was different than what we, you know, even, you know, perhaps the way you had created that simulation or that montage would be different today, or maybe not. But I'm wondering, has, you know, rewatching it, has it, yeah, what effect does it have on you in terms of, I mean, it's already hard to watch or, you know, watching maybe some of your older films, but especially a film that's about time must be an interesting relationship to have, no?
Well, I haven't watched the film for, I don't know, it's been a few years probably now. So it was interesting to watch the clips today, as I am immersed in a new project. And the new project is in an assembly stage, which means, you know, it's raw material, and it doesn't have a refined edit. So it kind of jumps out at you when you look at something finished. You see how precise all the choices are in the finished product, and yeah, I feel good about it. I think if I did the film now, 10 years later, it would definitely be a different film. It would have different ways of looking at things. It would be informed by a different reality, the one we're living in now. But I think every film is a reflection of its time, and yeah, maybe I'll watch the whole thing.
And Peter, just to touch upon on the project that you're doing, can you tell us a little bit more about it? Can you tell us a bit? I mean, you were mentioning that it was a series. This has been kind of in the works for the last few months, but we'd love to hear more about it.
It's a series idea. It harks back a little bit to a film I made, I guess 20 years ago almost, called Gambling Gods and LSD, which was again a theme-driven kind of film. And I had shot a lot of footage and realized that the nature of what I was collecting would be really good as a series, as opposed to a condensation, trying to get everything in that case. It was still a long film. It was 3 hours. But now we're trying to restructure the way of presenting an experience, a documentary meditative experience like I do, into episodes. And it is a personal diary-esque approach to things, asking the question, well, it's not really the question, but what does the grass is always greener on the other side mean? And that's addressed to different people in different situations. It's contemplated in many different ways. So that's the backbone of the series, which allows you to observe a lot of different shades of human activity and human yearning. And now in COVID days, the greener grass on the other side is also interesting because we're kind of in this general lockdown state, various forms of isolation and precaution, all anticipating what will come out the other side. How will life be different? How can we make it better? And there's lots of people talking about that now, obviously.
And I know this is probably a whole other hour of discussion, but in parallel to the idea of producing work, right, and being inspired about the realities that we're in today, what are your thoughts about sharing work in this era? Sharing it, do you feel a sense of opportunity or frustration? We were talking about like the fact that many, there's a lot more online platforms, perhaps not as many opportunities for theatrical experiences, or at least not for a few more months, or maybe even up to another year for that to happen. But I ask you because a lot of your films merit that kind of cinematic experience. I mean, we were talking about the Museum of the Moving Image and kind of the decor, kind of reinforcing what was on the screen, and the Anthology Film Archive is also another very iconic place where we showed a picture of light. So I was wondering if you could just, as final words, share your thoughts about. I know there are people having long conversations about film distribution and all these things, but how do you see this whole streaming and online? And
well, you're right. I mean, I love the idea of cinema space, to be enveloped in sound and to have a proper image. And I also love the social aspect of it, that you're a group of people who can come out of the theater and whatever, have a drink, go for a walk, but share the experience. I mean, those are some of the most rewarding types of screenings. So that's not really happening in the traditional sense now, but luckily, the technology is such that we do have, if we can afford it, a relatively good big screen at home with good sound. You can even project at home, and I think there's a nice possibility there for small groups of people, even outdoor cinema, to be streaming things in small groups and having that experience. So I would encourage, viewers to maybe think of like their home viewing experience as a cinematic experience. In other words, to have a proper projection situation and to dedicate that time, like not to break the flow. If you have a 2-hour film, you watch it in one sitting, because that's in many cases how filmmakers have designed the experience to be, and it's very rewarding when you can do it like that. So I don't think it's impossible to have profound cinematic experiences with the technology we have today. But I do, as everybody else, look forward to the more communal way again too.
Well, hopefully there will be like a revival. Everybody will be, like after the Great Depression, there will be like a moment of flourishment where everybody will be running to theaters. Yeah, because of the frustration.
And outdoor screenings are wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. And the drive-ins and well, Peter, it's lovely. I mean, we could go on and on, but we're so delighted to have been able to speak to you for this last hour. And of course, I would want to speak also about Becoming Animal, which is, a film that is very dear to my heart. And but you know, that will be for another time. But I wanted to encourage everybody to see The End of Time. It's going to be on our platform for a few more hours. And we're delighted to be able to show it again online. And of course, there are many, many other films that that everybody should watch. Peter, where can people watch your films? I mean, they're all over the place, but what's one of the best ways to watch some of your films?
Well, I guess if you go to my website, petermettler.com, there's information there. We have pretty well all my films on Vimeo, Vimeo on demand, and there's a number of other platforms. Doc Alliance has several of the films in Europe. Yeah, but I think if you go to my website, you can find your way around to different things, and there's some free films as well as video on demand films. Yeah.
Well, we look forward to seeing or hearing more about the series that you're working on as well. And yeah, thank you so much, and thank you to everybody that's been out there. We didn't get a chance really to get to the questions, but anyway, it'll be for another time. We'll send those your way, Peter. But thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you likewise. It was very enjoyable.
Thank you.